Ancient Egypt. This is lesson 1, which is on Egyptian social classes. Today, after we did the planners and announcements, and we kind of discussed finishing up the tests and the results from our last unit on prehistory and Mesopotamia, we did a social classes group activity where we discussed the social classes here in the United States currently, and we talked about how those compare to the social classes of ancient Egypt and how they're similar and different. We also watched part of a crash course video on Egypt and the CNN 10 student news with any time left. The ICANN statement was to identify 6 Egyptian social classes in order. The first activity we did was to just look at several different careers or positions in American culture, and we made pyramids in groups, and we kind of discussed where on the pyramid these particular groups of people go. Do they go at the top, like maybe CEOs and business, the owners of large companies, or do they go towards the bottom, such as maybe homeless people or prisoners, people who are incarcerated, and who goes in the middle? So this was an interesting discussion about how we value people in our society and for what reasons and why, and how much of it's based on income and how much of it's not. So that was our first initial discussion about American culture. Then we read about ancient Egyptian culture and discussed the different social classes in their system. So, of course, at the top is the pharaoh and his or her family. What makes Egyptian pharaohs different from the kings of other countries, both anciently and in modern times, is that, of course, the Egyptian people believed that their pharaohs or kings were more than just people. They believed that their pharaohs were gods on earth, the god Horus living on the earth, so kings had a lot of power. Priests worked in the temples and did ceremonies, funerals, and things like that for their local communities. Scribes, since it took so many years to learn how to write hieroglyphics, a very difficult language, scribes were well paid and had a lot of jobs that were high up, keeping records as accountants and things. An artisan is someone who makes really nice things. It's more of a skilled craftsman job, so they also were well paid because only rich people could afford such luxury items that they would make. Farmers come down next, a little bit less skilled of a job. They usually didn't even own their own land that they were farming, but they were farming on lands that were owned by the pharaoh, by other wealthy individuals, or by the temple, or the temple in their community, the religion. When the Nile River was flooding, the farmers had lots of extra time, which they would spend building large projects, construction projects in Egypt. So you may think that masses of slaves built the pyramids and the other temples and monuments of Egypt, but probably just not true. Of course, while some slaves probably were used in some construction, most of the labor to build the pyramids and the other monuments was Egyptians. It was farmers who were working during inundation or the Nile floods. And then at the bottom, Egyptian culture, like most all ancient cultures, did have slaves and slavery. Slaves could be bought and sold as property. They worked as servants. It was in Egypt possible to buy your way out of slavery if you could scrape together enough money to do so. Most slaves in ancient Egypt were brought back to Egypt as captives from wars. When Egypt would fight wars with their neighbors, to the victor go the spoils. They would bring a lot of people back as slaves to work in Egypt. So that is the Egyptian social classes.